Hi, I'm Dan Costa, Editor-in-Chief of PC Magazine, and welcome to Fast Forward, where we have an ongoing conversation about living in the future. We are still at South by Southwest. We are at the Great Britain House in a fabulous roof deck. There are a bunch of people entering the room. It's going to be a little bit noisy, but we're going to have a great conversation about the future of cities. I have with me as my guest Stephen Hilton, the Director of Bristol Futures, and we're going to have a fascinating conversation to have with you. Stephen, thanks so much for talking to me.
It's great to be here.
So let's talk about, first of all, let's talk about Bristol. For people in the US, people worldwide who aren't familiar with Bristol, what do they need to know about Bristol compared to any other city in England?
Okay, so Bristol is a city of 500,000, million in the city region, but probably the thing that you need to know is that we are a creative, quirky, open, unorthodox sort of place. And so this idea of tech, but also tech intersecting and clashing into creativity is really what drives the city, both in terms of its culture and its people, but also its economy.
And smart cities, so when we say Director of Bristol Futures, what does that entail?
So Bristol Futures is around helping the city to anticipate some of the disruption that is inevitable as technologies are introduced and different jobs come and go, different ways of working change, and so we're sort of trying to bring a whole ecosystem of people together to position the city to benefit from innovation.
And who does the, so when we talk about smart cities, everybody wants to have a smart city. I find it very hard to define exactly what makes a smart city.
And I think it's fair to say that we have a bit of a love-hate relationship with this idea of smart cities. You could sort of see a world where smart cities are all the same, a bit like shopping malls. You know, you have one blueprint and you apply it top down everywhere and it's great and it's efficient, but it also sounds really dull. So I think that the Bristol take on smart cities is how do you harness all of that potential for innovation and the creativity, but how do you apply it to your local place to make it more distinctive, more creative, more fun, more engaging, more inclusive? How do you create opportunities for your local businesses to scale and grow and at the same time be welcoming to people from outside who've got great ideas?
So how are you doing that in Bristol? Like, what are some of the unique things that work there?
So we do quite a lot of work around this sort of intersection between creativity and tech. So we have a program called Playful Cities, which looks at how you can work with creatives and artists to use city infrastructure to create different sorts of experiences that connect people to the city. So we had a program called Hello Lamppost, where people could talk to street furniture, to lampposts and bollards, and the lampposts and bollards would talk back through text. We had a program called Shadowing, which played around with the idea of CCTV cameras, so cameras for the police to sort of survey the city. Instead of taking an image in, the camera projected out an image of somebody who'd walked past it before, and so it became a spectacle and people wanted to come along and play with the camera. And so we sort of use technology as a way of bringing people into a conversation about the city, what the opportunities are to do things differently, to think differently about how technology creates a sort of collective experience of a place that's different, really.
It's a very interesting concept because most of the time we talk about smart cities, we talk about productivity, we talk about efficiency and traffic. Yeah. You hardly ever talk about play. So,
for me, the dilemma with smart cities is it's all been about top-down push. It's, you know, the worst of smart cities is big tech companies thinking they know what's best for us all and developing a application or a product or service and expecting it to be the thing that changes our lives. The reason I talk about play and creativity and fun and culture is that that's what engages people. And if we're going to have a sensible, equal conversation about what is the space for real, genuine smart cities, then it needs to be one that's equally owned by you and I as residents and citizens as much as it's owned by tech companies or government.
So how is Bristol responding to two innovations? One, the taxi cab hailing services like Uber and Lyft, and then what's eventually going to be self-driving cars in which these cars are driving ourselves around. Is that, do you envision that in your future?
Yeah, we do. We have, so I'll take the last one first. So we've got two demonstrator projects in the city around driverless cars, autonomous vehicles, called Flourish and Ventura. And we're working with a whole consortium of businesses, robotics people, systems people. But in both projects, our emphasis has been on what's the human experience of autonomous vehicles. So in one project, it's specifically about taking and releasing control of the vehicle to the AI, because that's the point where there is most risk.
Handoff,
yeah, and so that whole sort of sense of what's it like as a driver to relinquish control and then take it back is what we've been looking at. In the second driverless car project, it's about looking at the benefits for people who have mobility difficulties, older people, people who perhaps can't currently drive, and therefore what are the opportunities about a more inclusive mobility system. In terms of your first sort of challenge around Uber and those sorts of models, we have a really interesting small business in the city called Esoterics, who runs something called a Booksy. It's half a bus and half a taxi. Okay. And the idea is that it uses real-time information about the journeys that you and I want to make, and it creates that sort of organic route. And I think for many cities, the sort of arterial routes are easy to plan, but it's all the infill routes, it's the end-to-end journey stuff that Uber and others have sort of got that, but actually from a city perspective, if we can be behind some of those other more locally driven solutions, A, it's good for business, and B, it starts to generate real data about end-to-end journeys that can help to plan the sort of future transport services.
It's a little bit more communal, it's probably more efficient, it just requires a little bit more forethought in terms of how to sync up people going to the same, not necessarily the same place, but the same area.
Absolutely. And it unlocks, I think, a whole load of local opportunities about people being able to get to areas where there are jobs and employment that maybe are too difficult to easily get to at the moment. It creates a whole opportunity for people who are maybe quite isolated in cities. We forget that actual social isolation is an increasing problem in cities, and therefore if we can find ways to make it a bit more communal, a bit more cooperative, a bit more fun, a bit, then actually we can unlock all sorts of other benefits as well.
All right. In terms of challenges that you've faced, where do you see the biggest challenges? Is it resources? Is it the private sector? Is it getting the government on board to sign off on these things?
I think I guess a lot of people will talk about scaling up. So we've done in Bristol and many of the UK cities, we've done pilot after pilot after pilot. And how do you go from a pilot to something that is big and impactful is a real challenge. And I sort of have mulled this over for quite a long time, and I've decided that actually the biggest challenge is not worrying about the fact that you're constantly doing pilots, because I've sort of got this idea that cities are now permanently in a state of beta. Yep. You sort of trial something, you learn from it, you maybe do it a bit differently, a bit bigger next time, you trial it, you make a few more improvements. And I sort of think having the confidence and the capacity to recognise that it's about continual, iterative, agile change in a city is probably the mindset that we need to get to.
The noise level is starting to pick up, but there's a panel that's going to be starting very soon. I want to get a couple of quick questions in before we do that. Looking into the future, what technological trends are you most concerned about? What do you think that people need to pay more attention to?
So up until now, we've had quite a sort of naive view of how we give away our data. We have a sort of benign view, really, that if we sign these terms and conditions, nobody will do us any sort of great harm. And I think we will become more sophisticated in our understanding of what data we're giving to who and what the sort of social contract is around that. So what do we get in return for providing, quite comprehensive amounts of data to third parties? So I think there's a challenge around what I would call data literacy. How do people become more knowledgeable and more in control of the way that they give away personal information?
On the flip side, what are you most optimistic about? What trend do you think is going to really transform the world and is going to benefit all of us?
So we're at a moment in time where sort of democracy and city governments are often struggling for legitimacy. And I'm absolutely of the view that if we can get this opportunity right, it's about creating a much stronger democratic sort of system within cities. We can really connect people back both to their city and to their local community, but also to making decisions and choices that they feel that they've got some sort of traction and connection with.
So is there, on a day-to-day basis, is there any product or service or a gadget that you use every day that really makes you, inspires a sense of wonder and that you're just thrilled to have in your life, that makes your life better?
So it's not entirely obvious, but my eyesight is not great, and therefore I completely rely on my phone to get me to places.
Directions.
Talking directions. Being able, just being able to wander around. I can't always see street signs. I can't always see the names on things, but I'm completely liberated because I can get door to door without needing to ask anybody for help.
It's a great answer. And if people want to find out what's going on in Bristol, find out what you're working on, how do they find you online?
So you can go to bristolfutures.global and you will find me and you will find more about our work there.
Very good. Stephen, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us.
It's great to meet with you. Thank you.
That's Fast Forward for today. I want to thank you. If you want to see more episodes of this show, you can go to PCMag.com. We've got all of our episodes there. If you want to listen to this show, you can find it wherever fine podcasts are given away for free. Thanks for joining us. I'll see you in the future.